Alright everybody, so today I have Dmitry Pirog. We're going to be looking at some of the things that he does with his head movement and how he slips the punches so well that's being thrown by his opponent. To start off, we'll be looking at the proactive defense by Dmitry Pirog and how he predicts patterns, okay? And so if you look at a fighter like Mayweather or like a fighter like James Toney, you know, all of these guys have the ability to be proactive with their defense. What does that mean? That means that they base off their movement, not with the punches that the opponent throws, but their presumption of what they're going to throw. And so if you learn to pick up on patterns and you learn to practice dodging the most common combinations, you'll be learning to be proactive with your defense, and you won't even have to react to the punches that's being thrown at you. You just have to move your head in certain ways that will dodge certain punches, okay? So to start off, we'll be looking at this clip. And so here he will pull, he will slip, he will duck, and he will duck once again. And so even though Daniel Jacobs wasn't throwing anything, because Pirog has that proactive defense, he moves his head based on the patterns that he predicts and he expects. He doesn't base it off of what his opponent throws, okay? And here he'll do the same thing again. He will pull and then he will slip. He will pull, expecting a jab. He will slip to the left, expecting a right hand. Then he will slip to the right, expecting a right hand or a left hook. I don't know what that is. But it all comes down to moving your head in a certain way before your opponent even has the ability, or before your opponent even gets the chance to throw a punch at you. And so even though Daniel Jacobs wasn't throwing anything here, he just throws a jab. As soon as Jacobs throws a jab, Pirog already has a set way to move his head, okay? And so even though Jacobs wasn't throwing anything, he moves his head in a certain way here, and then he slips. Even though he's not really seeing anything, even though Jacobs wasn't throwing anything. Okay, so here you will see the same thing go. He will roll his shoulders, or he will pull the jab. He will roll his shoulders, and then he expects a right hand, so he slips over to the left side. And then now he expects a left hook, and so he will duck under to the right, okay? And so Jacobs wasn't throwing anything, but because Pirog has a proactive defense, he already knows how to move his head in a certain way that can defend himself from those common combinations that he commonly does. And so here you will see it again. He actually demonstrated it twice here. He will pull, he will throw a jab right there, and then he already expects a counter right hand. He already sees that coming, and so because he has a proactive defense, he knows it in advance, and so he ducks under the right hand, and then he knows that a left hook follow-up will come from this right hand, and so even though he doesn't see the left hook coming, he already expects it, and he has a proactive defense, and so he will block the left hook right here. Boom. Now we'll talk about his entry and how he enters low, using his evasive head movement in order to enter and cut the range, okay? So here, he will duck under, or he will crouch down, and then you'll see he's moving his head along the way. He will crouch down, and he will shorten the range. He will move his front leg forward, and so when you're low, your opponent doesn't have the ability to hit you high, okay? Because when you're low, it's really hard to hit someone when they're low like that. And so by entering low, like what Pirog does all the time, he goes like that, and then he enters low again here. By entering low, your opponent has no way of hitting you high because you're ducking under the possible punches that may come. And so it makes your entry much easier, okay? And Pirog will do the same thing here. Instead of going straight in, he will go straight in, but low. He doesn't go straight in and keep his head up. He ducks down, he lowers his body, he lowers his body, so he'll make himself less vulnerable to the punches, because when you're in this position, it's really hard for your opponent to hit you because you're very low. And then there he does it again, just lowering his head, ducking down, crouching, not necessarily crouching down, but just lowering your head when you're entering and when you're close in range. And here's the last one. Again, he'll do the same thing. Here he will enter, but he will lower his body first, right here. And by lowering your body, it's much harder to hit you with straight punches because your head does not match, or your head is not at the same level as the shoulders of your opponent. And so what does that mean? It's much harder to hit you. Okay, so I draw an arrow here, and you'll see just how the level is very different. And so even though Jacob sticks out that right hand, because Pirog is very low, it's very hard to hit him. Okay, and then he'll switch up to a southpaw stance. All right, next up we have ducking low. Okay, so all of these are basically indicating that Pirog loves to stay low, and Pirog loves to duck low whenever Jacobs throws a punch. And so here, Jacobs will throw a couple of jabs, and you'll see one of the things that's different from Pirog and Mayweather, although Pirog picked up a lot of things from Mayweather, is that Mayweather normally bends at the waist and he leans over to the right side, okay? But Pirog ducks under like a U, okay? So what you'll see here is instead of bending his waist to the side, he will go in front of the body of Daniel Jacobs, and so he goes straight in with his ducking, and he's very low. And then Jacobs will throw a couple of hooks, find it hard to hit him. He's ducking, but he's not bending his waist over to the side. He's ducking straight. He's ducking, and his body is still in front of Jacobs. But what does it do when you're this low, when you duck in a very low level, like Pirog does? Jacobs cannot place his punches because number one, the distance is not there, and number two, his level, the level of Pirog's head is so low that Jacobs won't be able to hit him as much as he does when Pirog is standing straight up, okay? Now we will see this clip again. Jacobs will throw a couple of jabs, and then Pirog ducks low, he counters with the left, and then here he will duck under again. But notice when Pirog ducks under, he doesn't duck under like under the armpit. He ducks under almost to the groin. So normally the level of ducking is right under the armpit. I'll draw an arrow here. Normally when you duck, you want to go under the armpit, but Pirog ducks so low, it almost reaches the waistline of his opponent, and so you see it right there, okay? He ducks under very low, and then you'll see the same thing here. He will duck under, and his head is almost at the waistline of Daniel Jacobs, and so that's what makes his style of ducking very different. It's very low, and he really leans down, you know, straight in. And here you will see it once again. Look at the level of his head. He ducks in very low, and instead of ducking right under the armpit of his opponent, he ducks almost to the level of the waistline. You see that? And so one of the cons of doing this is it affects your vision, because when your head is in that position, you normally can't see anything and you cannot keep your head up. Okay, but because Pirog has a proactive defense, he does not have to see up high, or he does not have to see anything from that position, because he already knows how to move his head in a certain way that can guarantee himself from getting hit with the combinations that's being thrown at him, okay? Now we will see how he enters low, and then he actually baits his opponent to throw certain shots at him. So this is the low entry bait. So he baits his opponent into throwing a couple of shots, and making him more open, or making his opponent more vulnerable to getting countered. And so he baits his opponent into throwing something, committing to a certain punch, and then he counters his opponent right away. So here he will go forward, he will stay low, he takes that front leg forward, and he cuts the distance. Because Jacobs felt threatened, he will throw a left uppercut. And then Pirog just rolled his shoulder. He did not counter right there. And here you will see him enter low again, and then because Jacobs felt threatened that the distance was already getting shorter, Jacobs will throw a right hand. Again, Pirog did not counter in that particular sequence. But here we will see him counter now. He will enter low again, and then this time it's not a slow, but he still enters low. Okay, and now Jacobs throws a jab, he sticks that lead hand out. Jacobs throws a jab, and then off of that bait, off of that low entry, Pirog was able to counter with a right hand. Okay. Boom.